Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning back in. I'm so grateful you're here. And today we have another really awesome and super special guest. So I'm really excited about this conversation, and I think it's going to be another really good one. And so we have here today Kipp Colvin, who is an amazing person who does really wonderful things. We first connected a couple years ago when Kipp was doing amazing work to create positive change for the LGBTQ community on the advocacy side of things. And I know you've done lots of different things to empower the community and BIPOC people. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you in a moment so you can introduce yourself. But I'm also really excited that you're now creating positive impact for LGBTQ and BIPOC people on a more individual one-on-one basis with your coaching. I know you do group coaching too. So really, really excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Andrea. It is so good to be here with you today. So good. Yes, my name is Kipp. My pronouns are he, him. And I have been at this work for a long time. It seems like it is just been ingrained in me just about creating empowering spaces for people. I consider myself as like a culture creator and an empowerment facilitator for people, really just allowing them to find themselves and having them to really connect to who they truly are. And that's really where I kind of stand and land. Yes, my work has taken me to places that I didn't think that I would be. I never thought that I would be in higher ed. I did that for 25 plus years and then had a dream job at the Human Rights Campaign for 2 presidential cycles, where I met amazing people like you and others across the country. And I'm just excited to be here with you today to really talk about how we're really like creating spaces for LGBTQ plus and BIPOC people to really thrive in our country. So ready to answer some great questions for you.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, just so grateful you're here because there's so many amazing things you do, and you've created so much positive change for the community in so many different areas and spaces. So really grateful for that. And to start us off today, it would be awesome if we could talk more about the work that you do with BIPOC and LGBTQ people to help empower them and help them connect to their purpose.
Yes, I think that one of the things that I know I struggled with as being a BIPOC person, was really finding out who I am. And I think that for especially our most historically marginalized individuals, we have always questioned who we are, no matter what space we're in, because of the environments and the barriers. And let's just be frankly, the systemic racism that is here on all different levels of isms in this country. And it really takes you to take time to figure out who you are, what you believe, what you stand for. So I had the opportunity during the pandemic to create Colvin Coaching, which is a space that I hold dear for people to really hold space for them to figure out who they are, what matters to them, what values they want to create, and what purposeful life they want to do. Because I want people to not just survive, I want them to thrive. I want them to figure out how they can actually show up into those authentic spaces and places that they want to be. And that doesn't happen unless you really can figure out who you are and what really matters to you. So that is one of the ways that I created that space. How we do it, it's a client driven space. And I say we because it's me and that other person, figuring out how we're going to create a plan for what you want to create or what you want to survive and thrive in. And how do we do that? We create a plan that's customized to you, what you want to do, and how you want to engage. Mostly people come out of these sessions figuring out a couple of things, their values, what matters to them, and ultimately discovering some things that were in their past that kind of are leading them to some positive things for their future.
Great. And so, based on everything you've shared, one thing that is really interesting to me when we talk about coaching is that we reflect on internal barriers, mindset barriers throughout our coaching journeys. And so, I'm curious to hear more because for BIPOC and LGBTQ people, as you mentioned earlier, they face so much stigma and so many societal barriers. And how do we, I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how we kind of address those societal barriers in our coaching journeys and help marginalized communities become the best empowered, the most empowered and most authentic selves when they're experiencing all of these societal stigmas.
I think it's, I love that question. So I'm trying to make sure I pause to think about it in a way that honors it. I think one of the things that is important is what I've come to learn in my coaching and helping people understand is this sense of belonging. And what I mean by that is I can probably tell you 95% of my clients, when we have a conversation, they may come in and say, I'm trying to, I want a new job. I want a new career. This is what I want to do. Help me figure out how to get there. And as we're talking through how you want this career, I believe we're also talking about what is the environment that you want to belong in into this new career that you want. When I'm talking to someone that is trying to navigate, starting a business, ultimately we're talking about, yes, we can do the business plan and what all that entails and how do you get there, but then how are you showing up as the CEO of that business, belonging in that space? So that is the undercurrent, I think, for myself of what I try to kind of bring about in my coaching practice and skill set is this idea of belonging and having people really understand who they are when it means that they're being seen, heard, and validated. Thinking about times when they've been, supported, when they have been included and accepted, and what does that look like? So if we find that base of what that looks like, how do you actually do that for yourself and stand in that place of belonging for yourself? Because if you can figure out what that space is, then these barriers that we are actually trying to kind of bust through are going to be easier for you to do, because then you know who you are. You know who you are in conflict. You know who you are in joy. You know who you are when your values are being compromised. You understand that. So really, that's the first thing that I try to get people to do, is to actually figure out where is their space of belonging. And as you know, probably as we are coaching individuals, this sometimes is the first time that an individual has been still. Still meaning they have actually taken a breath. Because all of this stuff is coming at them day in and day out. This hustle, this trying to survive. So when I say I am holding a space for you, I think that's one of the cool things that happens when this idea about us trying to figure out how do we combat these places is because I think a lot of people are just trying to find psychological safety in spaces. And I feel like you and me and other coaches are providing that kind of space for people where they have some psychological safety. They have some presence of being still, where they can actually hear their thoughts, think about a situation for the first time without all of this external and internal noise happening. So that's one of the ways I think that, I try to hold those spaces that I find as a place, like if I can get someone into that space, it's golden. I always say, you have all the answers. I am just holding space here for you to figure it out. You have all the answers that you need. All of it's within you. So let's just take some time, take a breath, and figure it out together.
Wow, there's so much good stuff there. So the first question that came to mind as you were talking,
Mm-hmm.
right at the end, you talked about us having all of the answers within. And I'll
Yes.
just tell you from my perspective, for a long, long time in my life, I worked with therapists, coaches, other kind of mentors and guides. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, all of that work has been
Mm-hmm.
super important. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm such a big fan of therapy and coaching. But at the
Yes.
same time, but I think the main thing that I took away from therapy and coaching, because I would go into those spaces and would want people to give me the answers. And I didn't realize until later on in that journey that it was never about someone else giving me the answers. It was about someone giving me that space to find that connection to my, or like reconnect with my authentic self and my inner voice. And so I know this is going to be a big question, but I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on how you as a coach, how you can best help your clients and people connect with that inner wisdom.
Yeah, I think for so long, individuals have been faced with this is what I'm supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to interact in this space. This is how I am supposed to show up. And I think that just comes because of cultural identity or spaces or trauma that we have had to deal with in order to mask and protect our peace and ourselves. However, I think if we can really get individuals to figure out how they show up into a space authentically, and that authentic word I think has been taken, for extremes from left to right of what that looks like, and it's just a word that we just say. But I try to get folks to actually understand, what does it mean for you to show up authentically? What does that feel like? What does that feel like? Think of a time when you actually were in a space and you felt like home in your body. That's that's you showing up in your authentic space. Now, how did you get there? What did it feel like? What did you do? What were your thoughts? What were you telling yourself? How did you feel? I also think in this whole thing about just people showing up into their authentic selves, I know this is not a leadership podcast, but I also think that everybody is a leader. And I firmly believe that despite a title or a position, we are all leading ourselves based upon the values we exhibit, how we show up to conversations, and the actions that we exhibit to as well. So each day, like us, like we're showing up on this podcast, we are showing up as leaders. When you are going to work, regardless of your title or position, you are showing up as a leader. So, what is your leadership story that you are telling yourself every day? What story are you saying? What story are you telling? So, when you're having conversations, that's part of your leadership story. When you are interacting with people, it's part of your leadership story. So, I say that because I also think that sometimes people don't see themselves as a leader. And if you can see yourself as a leader, that you are leading your life, you are leading your life. That completely changes how you are showing up into a space, or even as in the spaces that you inhabit. If you're looking at it in that way, that every action, decision, and conversation you have, you are creating a story. So, what kind of story do you want to create? That, I think, for me and my clients, allows them to figure out how they show up into an authentic space, how they show up into their authentic selves. And I just have to say, I think it first starts with how do you see yourself? And then I think it also has to do with what are your values? What are your values? What does it look like when those values are being exhibited? What does it look like when you're living in and out of those values? So when I'm thinking, when I'm talking to an individual, we've got a situation that they want to conquer, they want to actually figure out. I just start asking them basic questions about, well, how do you see yourself in that position? If you were, if all these obstacles were removed, how would you show up? And then if you can figure out how you want to show up, well, then let's figure out step by step how you get there, little by little.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad you brought up the leadership piece, because and I want to talk about values in a bit too. But
Hmm.
so many thoughts came up for me as you were talking about the leadership piece, because I think I'm trying to remember how you said it. I think you said we have to become the leaders in our own lives.
Yes,
And
yes.
that is something that really kind of hit me, that really resonated, because
Hmm.
so many times we see BIPOC and LGBTQ people from marginalized backgrounds. We see them being kept from leadership positions, and we see
Yes,
kind of
yes.
societal barriers keeping
Hmm.
them from assuming leadership positions. And it's interesting because it on the one hand there's all these societal barriers, and on
Hmm.
the other hand
Hmm.
we're almost like we are required to step up even more, and
Hmm.
yeah, like
Hmm. Hmm.
show up even more
Hmm.
as leaders
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
order to be seen and feel
Hmm.
validated in a way, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think that that is something we all, I think, we've reckoned with at one point in our lives. This idea about, I have to next level it all up again. I have to. I remember, as a black man, my dad told me that, Kipp, you are not going to be able to show up just as this person to do the job. You are a black man. You are going to have to show up at an even extraordinary rate than the person behind you. And I think all of us have carried that weight on us at some point. However, you can't sustain that. That's not sustainable. Because then all that you're worried about is the weight that you're carrying and not showing the possibilities and the excellence of who you are. Because you're too concerned about carrying this weight, not about, let me show you what I can do. Let me be the person that I want to be. Let me, as some people say, make you see me in a way that I want to be seen. There is something, I think we've all been in a place where you see someone and you can just tell they are in their light. And when you see that person, you're like, wow, because they're not carrying any weight. They're like, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. These are my values. I have 10,000 ancestors behind me who are supporting me. And we are here to do this work. And I think it takes a lot. You mentioned therapy and all these amazing services that we can do. And I think you also just mentioned just the point about really getting to the point of who you are. I really think that that's the key to our people unlocking their greatness, is just taking time. You can have all of these amazing things to help you, but if you're not going to sit and take a moment and be still and figure out who you are, what triggers you have, what trauma you need to overcome. As a Jan Levan Sant says, do the work, Do the work on yourself so that you can show up being you. And I think as leaders, that's one of the things I kind of encourage people to do is to reflect, stop, take time, be still, so that you can navigate all the noise in your head. I think as I've seen it many times where people are stepping into, especially BIPOC and LGBTQ plus people, we step into situations that are so stressful and that are so trauma triggered that all of that just brings that up to the surface when we're in spaces. And I think that for me, what has helped me is figuring out what those are for me. What are those triggers? What are those traumas? Do the work, figure out what it is. How do you navigate that? How do you handle that? What are the tools that you can use in actually speaking truth to your mind so that you're not triggering yourself? It's the brain is powerful. And many times even in this moment, if we're sitting here and someone says, doesn't even say it, but it's like, I don't think I can do this podcast. Your brain doesn't know anything better. You just said that. Your brain is like, oh, we can't do this podcast. Here we go. And it's starting the systems to shut down. It's the flight, the scare flight systems are kind of coming in. But if you can just talk to yourself in a way that you would want others to talk to you, how do you be your best friend? How do you love yourself and say things in a loving way that you would want to hear? Every day I say like 5 or 6 affirmations to myself. And some days I say them 25 times because the world is worlding, the life is lifing, and sometimes I need it. And that's one of the things that I have found powerful is this idea about how do you speak to yourself in those moments when you're trauma triggered, when you're stressed. Those are the powerful moments. Those are the moments that you are actually putting bank in your coin. Like you're like really like, working yourself, putting stuff up into stock that you really know who you are when you can talk to yourself in ways of positivity in the face of danger, in the face of trauma, in the face of difficulty. Because at the end of the day, you are the one that has to get you through that. You have to believe in you. Others can have faith in you. They can believe in us. They can give us this kind of motivation. But at the end of the day, I have to believe in Kipp. I have to believe that I can do anything. And that, I think, is where it sounds simple, but it's so powerful. It's so powerful when you can feel that and believe that for yourself. And I hope that for each and every individual that is listening to this podcast, that you can say, I believe in me. I love me.
I mean, that was a mic drop moment. That was I don't know, I really felt that because for me over the last few years, and I talked about this on the podcast, it's been a crazy time for
Mm-hmm.
everyone I know, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a challenging time sometimes. It was a time that really tested me. And one thing I've really noticed is like the need for to become my own best friend. And I did a lot of work with affirmations. I think for me, and I feel like you probably can relate to that because we're both kind of used to the DC environment where everything's super fast and you
Yes.
kind of like never
Yes.
work enough.
Yes.
And for me, I also realized, especially over the last 1 or 2 years, I had to make a really strong effort to not always try to overfunction and take
Yep.
time for rest and have
Yep.
days where I'm like, I today seems like things that seem too much. I need some rest. I need some time for myself. And that for me has been a big challenge to do that, but I see myself now. I see myself more and more realizing, oh, I'm really tired. I need
Mm-hmm.
to go
Mm-hmm.
rest, or I need to go to the gym or do something for
Mm-hmm.
myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I think realizing that and taking those small steps to, yeah, become our own best friends, and whether it be through yoga practice, meditation, or affirmations, all of
Mm-hmm.
these other
Mm-hmm.
things, I
Yeah.
really think that is kind of
Yeah.
the work we came here to do in a way.
Yes. I love that. Be your own best friend. Oh my gosh. If you haven't used that, that is a tagline that we all should be using. Thank you for that. I love that.
It's
Yeah.
you
Be your
actually
own
said
best
that
friend.
first, and I
Your
really
own best
like.
friend. I just said it. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, you said that earlier. I wish I
Well,
could take
see, I
credit.
told you that's why I'm so I am in this conversation. I have no idea, the things that I've said, but hopefully they help someone. I just firmly believe that, I feel as coaches, all that we're doing is creating a space for people to find themselves. And what a privilege that is.
It really, yeah,
What a
it
privilege that
really
is.
is. And I'm sure for you as a coach working individually one on one with people, it must be an amazing moment when you kind of see that light switch on for people of like, wow, this is who I am, and I
Mm-hmm.
love myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The light bulb moments, as you probably know, the aha moments, those are the best moments. And I think that it has caused me to actually ask better questions, treat this as sacred space, and to really not take this as just like, oh, this is something that I've always wanted to do. I take this as a space of my part of trying to create, I think, like you are doing for this podcast, a positive vibe and light to go out to the world. So people understand that there are good people, there are kind people, there are people here who have your back. There are here people who want you to succeed. There are people here who want you to not just survive, but to thrive. So, yeah, yeah,
That is beautiful.
yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, that is really beautiful, and yeah, it's so needed right now at at this time in the world. And so you also earlier you brought up the work you do to help your clients identify their values and explore their
Mm-hmm,
values.
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm,
know from my own experience working with my coach, I already had done a lot of therapy, a lot of inner work, and I thought, oh, like the value stuff, I know all of that. Like, and then I when I really started to explore that with my coach, it was like,
mm-hmm,
wow, like
mm-hmm.
I can't believe that I didn't have a stronger understanding of the values that are running my life. I would love it if you could tell us more about that connection between our values, our purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and our goals in life.
This is my favorite subject in the whole world. And I think the reason that it is my favorite subject in the whole world is because I think I really dived into this first when I was working at the Human Rights Campaign. I was there when they created the organizational values. And then for the 6,000 plus volunteers that we had, we created values for them too as well, which I know that you were a part of all of that too as well. And that's really where I saw this idea about values and how they really could, if they can unify volunteers all across the country, then I always thought to myself, then what would happen if I actually took some values and decided this is how I'm going to show up engage the world and who I am. Think of your values as like you're on a road and there's always a line in the middle. And let's pretend that we are driving in the middle of the road, which we're not supposed to do. I pretend that your values is the line. It is the line that's keeping you on a straight path. And then you've got these guardrails over here. And like every now and then, you may get off, but then boom, your values bring you back. They are the center and the core of who you are and how you operate. And they are the center of when you are showing up in your authentic self, you are exploring all your values. You are exhibiting all your values at their best. And that's why I think that they're so core. That's one of the things that I actually tell my clients is to figure out what their values are. Take some time, be still, lay out your values. Now, when you lay out maybe 4, I tell them no more than 5, lay out those 5 values. Attach a time that you actually showed up into those values, each one of them. Think about another individual in your life on the opposite side of that paper. How did they show up in those values too as well? So you can kind of see some behaviors that are actually happening. I will say my values are faith, courage, care, and connection. I can tell you when I've showed up in those values and when I have not showed up in those values. And when I have not showed up in those values in decisions or conversations that I've had, it's because I'm not in line with my values. Happened to me last week at a meeting. I was leading a meeting. I was getting a little agitated about a conversation. And I didn't handle that conversation the way that I should have handled it. So before we wrapped up the meeting, I actually told folks, I said, before we leave, I just want to say something to you. I want to apologize for me not showing up at the way that we said that we were going to show up as colleagues. I did not show up in my values. I want to apologize for that. I will do better. And this is what I am going to do the next time. And I think for some people it was a shock because they had never seen someone do that before. A leader to say, and I think in mind the leadership level that I had was probably responsibility. I'll say that. The leadership responsibility that I had of the people in that group was probably higher than most. Meaning, as we talk about a title, I was, had a title which I do not like, title and hierarchy and all that, but we can go through that another time. But I think they were shocked that someone would actually admit they were wrong or that they didn't show up at the way that they wanted to do so. And that was because of my values. I could not, Andrea, sit through the rest of that meeting or go throughout the day and know that I had violated my values. And that's one of the things I think that I want clients to get to the point of. You describe your values, you know what they are. You can look at a situation that happened in your life or a difficulty, and you may know that you didn't handle it the way that it should have handled, or it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to do. 9 times out of 10, you were not showing up in your values. So if that's the case, then I always tell people when we're going into a situation and they're talking about, well, I did this and I did this and I did this. I'm like, great. What did your values look like in that moment? And when they can articulate that and say, this is the behavior that I exhibit when I am operating in courage. These are the behaviors that I exhibit when I operate in respect. Then that's when I think that's when this whole connection about your values and your purpose and who you are, all align when you can do that. And listen, they may shift. My values now are different than the values that I had 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I think all of this comes into combination. I still go back to what we talked about before, just about this idea of people being still. And you had mentioned this, when you had just opened up this piece about values. I think if there was something that we had to tell people was something that you could do to start out with, be still. Take some time to be still. It doesn't have to be, we all have busy lives. We may have kids. We may have careers. We may be going to school. We may be doing all of these things. But can you take 5 minutes and just be still for a second and think to yourself, how did I show up today? Did I show up the way that I wanted to? And if I didn't, where can I give myself some mercy and grace to show up in the way that I believe is authentic to me? And I just think if we could get people to do that, it would just be profound on how we all treat each other as humans, as people, trying to navigate this world of chaos and beauty all at the same time.
That's amazing. So as you were talking about the importance of finding that inner stillness,
Mm-hmm.
I thought about a conversation I had on the podcast last week with an amazing spiritual guide that I connected with here in Oakland. And they were
Mm-hmm.
talking too about how it's so important to find that stillness in order to connect with ourselves, but also
Mm-hmm.
to kind of listen to the universe and creating that space
Yes.
for the universe to drop in with
Yes.
instructions and
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
guidance. And
Yes.
it's so hard to do that in the environment we live in and the society we live in, because there's constant distractions. We live in a very kind of loud world that
Mm-hmm.
has lots of demands on us. So finding that stillness just
Yeah.
feels even more important.
Yes. Yes. I think it is so important. We have so much coming at us. Social media. How do we act? How do we see ourselves? What do we wear? What do we do? What do we eat? At work, we never can probably do all the things that need to happen or achieve all the goals that our supervisor or the organization wants us to achieve. In our relationships with other people, I think we still have that same kind of striving for excellence kind of way too, as well. But when is enough, where you can just, this is what I have to give, and this is what I have to be. And I don't think that you find that out until you can be still. And I also, what you just made me think of is, we all had this great thing that happened to us, which was a pandemic. And we had to sit alone in some cases. We had to be by ourselves in some cases. And I just wonder if we have all forgotten that 2 or 3 years ago, we all had these big revelations about who we were and how we wanted to show up. And now we are back in the chaos again. And I just remind people to take a moment just to be still. Because there's something about, that, I think Oprah says, when you don't know what to do, be still. Be still. I also, I wonder if we challenge our listeners here. When is the last time you stopped to be still and you could hear your heartbeat? You could feel yourself breathe. That you're actually here. That you're actually feeling in this moment. And you're actually you. And I think that's what we're trying to get people to do. is just to take a breath, sit with yourself for a minute. How did you show up today? Did you tell yourself you did a good job today? Even though things are going crazy and it didn't go the way that you wanted it to? You know what? But you showed up. You got out of bed. You started your car. You walked to work. You got on the train. You made it. Sometimes I tell people, the saying is showing up is half the battle, but I think it's how we show up. It's how we show up that is important. And in that how we show up, we treat people how to treat us. So how are you treating yourself so that you can show people how to treat you? That's what I think is the work, and what I think we can try to get people to do in that space of stillness. I'm a very spiritual person.
Me too.
And I just completely talk to God every day, every 5 minutes, every 5 seconds, whatever that higher power being is that you connect with. I believe that is so important for us to figure out what that is, so that you have a place just to rest.
This is so powerful. And I know I could talk to you about this stuff for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I know you highlighted throughout our conversation, which was awesome, you actually talked about different tools that people can use to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kind of move closer to their purpose and
Yeah.
move them closer
Yeah.
along their path, including affirmations, finding that
Mm-hmm.
stillness, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
being your own best
Mm-hmm.
friend. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's for people listening who are listening to this and are thinking, oh wow, like I would love to do more work to identify my purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is the first step you would recommend they take?
What do you value? What do you value in your life? And I think what are your values are important in that. I'll give you 3 things. What do you value? And figure out your values. And if you need help in figuring out your values, Brene Brown, you can go to brenebrown.com. She has an amazing worksheet that you can use to discover your values. The other thing that I would say is what brings you joy? What brings you joy? Figure out what brings you joy and schedule those moments of joy in your life, because we need it. There is so much happening in this world that we need to actually find places of joy for us to be able to show up in our authentic selves. So find those places of joy, I think, is important. And then I think the last one is know your values, what brings you joy, figure out how you put those moments of joy in your life, schedule it. If you love to read, find 10 minutes to read. If you want to take pictures and photography, find that time to do that during the day. Figure out what that is. And then I think lastly, as we've been talking, I don't know why I haven't thought about this before, but a lot of times in our community-based organizing, we talk about community agreements, which is how we're going to show up for each other. Respect, listen to all voices. I want to encourage people, if you want to find your purpose, what are your self-agreements to yourself? What are your self-agreements to yourself? Give yourself grace and mercy. Live into your values. I'd say part of those agreements for me would be true to yourself. So be very clear about what you say you're going to do for you. Because when you don't, then you are showing, oh, I don't trust me. I don't believe in me. I don't believe that I can show up. And then that stuff just spirals without you even knowing it. and then you believe it. So know your values, figure out what they are, schedule moments of joy, and what are your self agreements for yourself? I think those would be the things that I would ask people to do. And find a coach.
There's oh my god, there's so much good stuff there, and I mean, I really appreciate this amazing conversation and all of the tools and
Mhm.
questions that you highlighted, because that is so
Yes.
helpful, and I'm sure people listening will really benefit from that.
So,
I want to end our conversation by asking you a few questions that I ask all of my guests.
Lord, here we go. This is like speed dating. Okay.
So the first question is, what would you tell your 13-year-old self?
You belong.
That
Be
is very
okay.
beautiful.
You belong. Mhm.
That is beautiful. And can you tell us about a time you experienced a synchronicity in your life?
I think I try to do it every day. I try to find those moments where I can show up in my authentic self with actually what's happening in the moment. And that requires some presence, that requires you to be there, it requires you to actually know your values, know who you are. So I try to do that every day and be really intentional about it. I think the times that that's happened for me has probably been in the most times where I showed up in an armored heart and something has happened and I had to show up in a daring heart. I can think of a time, one of those moments was when I was leading a team for the Human Rights Campaign. I had to meet with them, I think 2 or 3 days after George Floyd's murder. And so many things were happening at that time. We're in a pandemic, we're in a racial pandemic, we're in a, societal pandemic, a health pandemic. So everyone was dealing with all these things. And I think in that moment, me showing up being armored and then knowing that I had to show up in a daring heart actually allowed everyone else to show up in a space that they could be authentic and show up in their vulnerability. That was one of the many experiences that I've had where that synchronicity kind of happened. And I think, like we've talked about before, that doesn't happen, just on purpose. You have to be intentional about it. So find those moments, look for them. Look for those moments of gratitude that you can find in your day and how you can show up.
That is a really beautiful and impactful way to end the conversation. And this idea of a daring heart and showing up with a daring heart, that is something I'll I've never heard of that before, but that is
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful. And I'm going to be reflecting on that for a while, I think.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for this
Thank
amazing
you.
conversation and all of the tools you highlighted. I love a good tool or exercise kind of to bring those lessons and learnings into our
Exactly.
everyday lives and make them actionable. So I really appreciate that. And so, for listeners who would like to connect with you or find out more about you, where can they find you?
You can find me at kippcolvin.com. Most likely, you can find me on Instagram at kipp.colvin. That's KIPP.COLVIN. You can also send me an email at kippcolvin@outlook.com. I think that's what it is. Yeah. KIPPCOLVIN at outlook.com. Yeah. This has been such a joy. Such a joy to be here with you. Thank you. And your amazing listeners too, as well. Thank you so much. for having me.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say, because earlier you talked about the importance of kind of bringing light and kindness into the world. And as someone who's worked with you, I just want to say you really are truly a person who brings that kindness and light into the world. And it's just something I really appreciate. And yeah, I'm just
Thank you
so
so much.
so happy we were able to do this and that we were able to reconnect. And yeah,
It's
I would love to have further conversations with you.
We will. We will. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.